Hey to all our listeners, this is Move to Improve. We're a podcast that explores health, athleticism, the body and its mechanics through like a health practitioner lens and a health expert lens. So today we have an especially inspiring guest, Chris Cederstrand. He tried not to give a long-winded introduction, but unfortunately he's a very accomplished guy. So, comes from small town Saskatchewan, grew up with aspirations of becoming a hockey player, was drafted to the WHL, played for the Rebels, played for the Broncos, and after suffering some concussion injuries and having, aspirations to kind of move on and pursue a life as a firefighter, went and finished his career, went ahead through the application process of becoming a firefighter. During that process, he was doing a road construction work, and was met with a horrific and life-changing accident. He was riding a packer, a heavy machinery used to actually compact road, and during that time the machine malfunctioned. It was maybe you could better tell it.
Diverted. Ultimately, as I was backing the piece of machinery up, Bow and Sarcy here for people that are familiar with Calgary, I was backing it up Bow Trail, and the machine malfunctioned, and long story short, without getting into the craziness of the piece of machinery shouldn't have been on the job, didn't have its maintenance up to date, didn't have brakes. In the process of trying to slow it down, I ended up back on the road, and then had the option of essentially jumping off there, having the piece of machinery go into the intersection of Bow and Sarcy at about 5:15 at night, which you can imagine is it's a very busy intersection. Would have been pretty devastating to have a 70,000 pound piece of machinery probably clipping along at 30-40 kilometers an hour going into that intersection. Ultimately, I was able to get it back into the median where we were working, and as I did that and jumped off, it hit a big pile of dirt and ultimately flipped, and a portion of it landed on me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Jesus.
And really inspiring event because Chris was able to take that trauma, and was his wife was faced with the decision of saving his life by going ahead and amputating the leg above the knee, and they went ahead and did that, and Chris was able to use that as fuel to accomplish unimaginable feats. He's went on to become a firefighter actually, and then represent Canada in the 2014 Paralympics as a sledge hockey athlete. Followed up and as a motivational speaker. He works with PX3 AMP, a hockey program. He's a representative of Autobox Prosthetics, founder of the Chris Cederstrand Foundation, who helps reintegrate physically limited athletes people into sports and athleticism, and get that part of their life back. So a really accomplished guy. I don't know if I missed anything. All right, and my name is Dr. Matthew Georges. I'm a chiropractor. I'm here with
Dr. Alex Fitzowich. I'm a chiropractor as well.
All right, so first off, I just want to ask, how you've accomplished so much. How did you kind of ever get this mental fortitude to just overcome adversity?
You know what? I mean, for me, it was something that I attribute a lot of that to sports. I've played sports my entire life. It was obviously, as you guys heard, I've been through, a fair number of different sports and been able to compete at them at a very elite level. And, it was always just ingrained with me, through parents and coaches, and there's just, there's never giving up, right? There's really, in my mind and my mentality, there's no such thing as failing. right? It's, failure is just the natural progression forward to bettering yourself. And so, when my hockey career ended, and then obviously, the injuries and things like that, my first thought was always just, how can I better myself from this situation?
Mm-hmm. And turning to sports was a way to kind of enact that, to show yourself that, how capable you were.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I've been very fortunate on that level. I'm gifted athletically, and it's always sort of been my bread and butter, regardless of what I do. And it was something that I've been able to utilize, to get me through some of the tougher points in my life, and like I said, especially from that young age, and from my the parental teachings and things like that, it's has created that mental toughness and mental grit to know that you just need to, there's essentially always a silver lining, I guess, right? You can look at something as, that the glass half full analogy, or half, it's either half full or half empty, and it's finding that silver lining in things, and then, for me, it's focusing on that and moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I've done a little digging on you, obviously, and it just seems like you're a guy that doesn't know how to, how to give up, or doesn't know how to stop. I saw videos of you golfing, wakeboarding, snowboarding, skating, anything that, athletic, you're doing it, and you're doing it well, let alone your, career as a sledge hockey athlete, which I really want to get into here in a second. But yeah, pretty amazing.
Thank you. No, it's just one of those things, probably more stupidity than anything, to tell you the truth.
Stubbornness.
Stubborn, and it was that, I had a really, it was a traumatic time for me after my accident. Probably the thing that was the most devastating whole incident that occurred around my accident was actually the gentleman that came in to speak to me while I was in the hospital, after spending all this time, in a medically induced coma, blah, blah, blah. And I'm supposed to have this motivational guy come in and talk to me about what I'm going to be able to do and everything like that. And I mean, it's still, the memory's still clear as day. This guy essentially hobbling in and telling me the best thing I was going to be able to do was bowl. And I mean, you were coming from a guy that, had played hockey at a high level, was in the fire industry, played every sport under the sun, because that was the way we did it back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm being told the best thing I can do is bowl, and it was something that was a very hard-hitting thing at that point, but ultimately became fuel to get out there and try and relearn to do everything that I was doing pre-accident. And, that it's one of those, it's an old adage, where there's a will, there's a way. There was obviously a lot of falls, and, things didn't necessarily come easy, but, I've been fortunate enough to work with some amazing companies that have helped me be able to do some of the things that I've been able to get out there and do, like getting back into the fire industry and getting sport legs and all the things that I have now that allow me to be active, and yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So was there ever a point where you thought that maybe you weren't going to be able to pursue a career or a life of athleticism, of sports?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, post-accident, it was something, as bad as the physical injuries were, the mental struggle that occurred after that was, 10 times as worse. Initially I was told, because of the nature of my injury and having the crush injury the way that it happened, that I probably, wasn't going to be able to wear a prosthetic and do all of that, which was obviously extremely deflating. And at that time, my accident happened in 2005. We weren't, we were just in that inception of YouTube and all of these things, right? And so a lot of this stuff wasn't readily available, right? I couldn't just go YouTube sledge hockey or YouTube paracycling or golf or whatever it is and find, essentially have somebody that's already walked that path and me follow those footprints. You just sort of had to get out there and try and do things yourself, which can be horribly discouraging. And And like I said, the mental struggles were, you know, very, very tough. I mean, it was a lot of years before I was able to get my head back into a proper place where I could start pursuing things again. You know, it was getting a lot of help and learning that I needed to ask for help. Growing up in Canada and being a hockey player, you sort of get that tough Canadian boy mentality, and you know, I moved away from home at an extremely young age to play hockey, and you sort of learn to kick your own ass, and you learn to hold yourself accountable, and when you have something traumatic happen to you like mine, where it becomes a very, you know, you have a very obvious physical limitation, that mentality actually just becomes toxic. You know, you can't keep beating yourself up for not being able to do something, because it's just, you know, you have to learn to adapt to it, and it wasn't something that I was able to do at that point. I relied on that mentality my entire life, and all of a sudden it's, you know, you're laying in bed, and I remember laying in the hospital, just, you know, it wasn't even just playing sports at that point. I mean, it's like, I can't even get up to go to the bathroom right now by myself, right? Like, how am I going to be a father? How am I going to do, you know, this whole, just live life in general, I guess, right? And so it was, you know, I had an amazing psychologist that helped me through some obviously extremely difficult times, and I mean, at that point I was on crazy medications. I mean, they had me so wired on fentanyl, it wasn't even funny.
Wow. It's nuts.
You know, and yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. I was able to get off of that and not have any mental addiction, which was an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's such a potent drug, but it was literally probably the two worst months of my life. It was like cold sweats and puking, and just the withdrawal from it was just nuts. But you know, ultimately, all that crap allowed me to move forward and you know, start looking at things in a positive light and progressing in the way that I have.
Yeah. Wow, crazy. So what did it feel like when you started to gain traction with your ability to accomplish, you know, physical activity, and you started to just see yourself do all these amazing physical feats?
It was obviously very rewarding. I mean, the first sport that I got out and tried was golf. You know, being a hockey player, golf was obviously the secondary, you know, sort of nature thing. And you know, I got out, and all of a sudden, you know, I was good at it, right? Even though I had to find ways to adapt. You know, right off the hop, I was, you know, within a very short period of time, I was fortunate enough to play in our Canadian National Amputee Open. You know, got to that level, and that just built confidence. It made me realize that, you know, there's a lot of possibilities, and like I said, you know, at that time, just not having the exposure to things. I remember crutching through a mall one day and having somebody just come racing up behind me, and it was like our Olympic paracycling coach here in Calgary, just out of the blue, and he's like, "Hey, you want to try cycling?" And I'm like, "Sure." I mean, never been on a bike in my life, and you know, so I started down that road and got very good at that, and obviously injury prone. I blew my knee out at a training camp out in Burnaby, but I mean, it was such a cool experience. You know, I was doing all my cycling in the Velodrome, which is
sweet.
A mind-blowing experience for anybody that hasn't.
Are the walls like as steep as they look?
100% are.
Yeah, you gotta be going fast.
You gotta be going quick, and I mean, some of the stuff that you have to do that just really plays with your mind, like learning to draft and to motor pace. I mean, you're out there, you know, your coach leading you on a motorbike, and you're having to keep your front tire like 6 inches behind the back tire of his, which is not something that most people want to sit there and, you know, practice, and you're having to learn to be in that much control of things, and it just helped overcome even more fears with that, because you're really putting yourself in a very uncomfortable situation at that point. Totally. And it just continued to sort of spiral from there. You know, I obviously love snowboarding, and so we did a little bit of research and found a company in the States that was creating these, you know, very early versions of sport legs, you know, of a snowboarding and skiing leg, and went, what the hell, let's give it a try. And you know, we was fortunate enough to get one of those. I was the first one that they'd ever shipped up to Canada, actually, and got back on my snowboard, and yeah, the ball just sort of kept rolling, and ultimately, you know, I ended up finding sledge hockey in 2011, which it was something that I had seen before, but you know, there's issues that I have with parasport and with adaptive sport, and you just end up with, there's two different streams that happen, and you have a, oh, that's cute factor that happens, and you have like a holy, you know, wow, right? And so, I mean, my very first interaction with sledge hockey is I saw it at a Flames game in between periods, and they basically had the youngest kids getting pushed around out on the ice, and it was just like,
that's not for me.
It's not for me. This doesn't look like something that I want to really partake in, and you know, ultimately there was a gentleman up in Edmonton by the name of Kieran Block who had played in the Western League as well, and had damaged his legs in a cliff diving accident, and he brought me out to a World Sledge Challenge, and that's where I got to see that, you know, holy crap factor for the first time, and it had me hooked.
Yeah, it is like, I watched some highlights or some games sledge hockey prior, and it's just it's such a ludicrous sport. Like
it is. It seriously
it
is.
doesn't seem possible, and
No.
yeah, it's brutal. There's a lot of contact, it's insane to me that there's just so much about the sport that kind of defies you know, what you think people can do, and
100%.
it's such a, you know, raw sport.
Well, it's an extremely violent sport. But yeah, from a physical standpoint, I mean, one of the things that I really liked about sledge hockey or para ice hockey is, you know, in a lot of para sports they have classification systems and things like that, right? And
for where the amputation is.
For everything that way, and para ice hockey is just a get out there and go. Right? There's no you have the best of the best, and it's you're not being hampered in any way, or, you know, getting to compete in, you know, in a class that you might not be happy with. Whatever the case is.
Right.
You just get out there to go, and it's essentially, you know, you have our top 20 sledge hockey players in each country, and that's where you go with that. And I mean, it's such an incredible sport. I mean, I would tell anybody that has the opportunity to go out and see it played at a high level. You know, it'll blow your mind. I mean, we got like Tyler McGregor on our national team now, who like, I think it was a few years ago, Connor McDavid did his lap in like 14 and a half seconds or something like that. I mean, Tyler does it in 17 on a sled.
Really?
You know, I mean, you're talking about, you know, AAA midget junior hockey speeds. You got guys on the team that shoot the puck, you know, 85 miles an hour with one arm.
Really?
Right? And then on top of that, it's extremely violent because you can't dangle in sledge hockey.
Yeah. You can't get out of the way at all.
Yeah, you're not able to come down. It's always a chase game and always an angles game. So just the amount of contact that happens is unbelievable. So
Yeah, like you guys are crushing each other.
Yeah,
you don't have a choice. That's literally, there's only two ways to beat somebody. It's either you beat them with speed or you beat them with brute strength. Right?
Yeah.
And so you end up having to learn a lot of little nuances while you're out there, because it's one of those things. I mean, you know, people hear the word hockey behind it, and I mean, most people, you know, haven't tried it before, and they think, oh yeah, you know, you're skating and you're stick handling, but it's not that. I mean, because you're using your arms as your motor mobility.
Yeah, you can't be stick handling.
And you can't be stick handling, and I mean, you're doing it. It's kind of like soccer, but even crazier, because I mean, soccer, you're not like dribbling and all the time, right? You got to be pushing and dribbling, and it's puck placement, and you got to be aware of where your sled is, because the minute you're, you know, if I can get my hips in front of yours in a sled, then I can start grinding you out.
Right.
And so it's keeping distance, and there's so many of these subtle little nuances that happen.
Right.
That are just crazy, and then we're doing that while sitting. I mean, my blades that I balance on are like 7/16 of an inch apart.
Yeah, they're
So,
absolutely
I mean,
insane.
There's you know, and that's all you're balancing on. So it's all just core and arms and back, and it's a truly crazy sport to witness.
crazy. And just watching it as as a chiropractor, I'm looking at you guys. Yeah, you're pushing yourself at the back end of your sticks, right, which looks incredibly difficult, as well as balancing. But you also, you're using both left and right arms to maneuver the puck and fire these pucks without, typically when you're, firing with a normal stick or a long stick, you can use your body and your legs to kind of rip it, but you're
just a
really, it's like a lot of, it looks really strenuous on your forearms, on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Well, and it definitely is. I mean, you end up with, that's ultimately what ended my career with shoulder injuries.
Yeah.
You do end up with a lot of that, and I mean, we'll probably come full circle to this, but I mean, some of the injuries and the way that you become. I mean, you guys probably see this a ton with, even people sitting at desks for such a long period now. I mean, you just become so rolled forward in sledge hockey because we spend so much time in almost like that ready position.
Yeah.
And, it's some of the older sledge hockey players that I've played with, I mean, they're just absolutely trashed because they've never dealt with this,
Right.
Tried to get back to a level of normal. Right, and it's just these injuries that occur in that are crazy, and I mean it's
well, your body's just like not made for it. Like all the sockets of your hips and all the muscles around your hips, like they're made for bearing your weight all the time. Your arms do not have that. They're supposed to be throwing and like shooting pucks and stuff like that. So just like that shoulder muscle development would actually be crazy to see.
It's nuts, and I mean it's also one of those things like those muscles and things like that are not designed around endurance.
No, that's the other thing.
Right? I mean, when you're playing any basically able-bodied sport, I mean, your legs are your mode of
Moving.
transportation, right? And your legs are designed, massive muscle groups, right, that you can go out there and become a long-distance runner, right? Or you can, whatever it is, right? You're able to do that while you're, at no point, especially in my athletic history, did I have to worry about being able to do skate like we do a 9.5 or 9.25, which is just 9 laps as fast as you can around the rink.
Yeah.
Right? Where would I have ever have trained my back development,
Yeah,
my
like your
arm
shoulders
development,
and lats.
and be able to train that so that it has enough endurance to drive you that way. Like
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like you don't go to the gym and do lat pull downs for 3 minutes because like that would be so damn hard. But you're like, I don't really have a choice. Like I'm basically doing rows of my body weight around the whole rink. Like
that's essentially what it is. So I mean, it's one of those things that it causes a lot of issues later on in life because it's a muscle group that's not designed to be, built up to that level, and fortunately now we have proper trainers and things like that. But I mean, in the past, like I know when I first started playing with the national program, like I remember going and doing our first fitness test, and we still had a 3-rep max on bench.
Yeah.
Right, like I'm sorry, sledge hockey has zero to do with bench.
Seriously.
Right? But there was never anything to counteract, or that's the wrong verbiage, but all the stress we were putting on our back to bring everything forward. And
Yes, 100%.
You just see some of these old sledge hockey players walk around and they're just like hunched like this because their backs are just so overdeveloped, and you were never brought back to a neutral.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's, as from our profession, that's so key from preventing shoulder injuries or forearm injuries, is like having that shoulder blade stability and that proper back development. And it's clearly something you have. I can see through the width of your shoulders, right? But so what are these super common injuries that you would find in sledge hockey? Can you speak to that a little bit?
It's a lot of abdominal injuries, a lot of back injuries, and probably the worst are the shoulder injuries, right? Because you're really exposing your shoulders to places they're not supposed to be, and you're exposing them and then exposing them to contact, right? So I mean, like I've blown my left shoulder. I've had 2 complete reconstructions done. The first, and what ended up starting it all, is I went to go make a pass, and I opened up my arm to make a pass, and the guy caught my arm.
Yeah.
Right, and just like
Cranked
and I'm going forward, and he's pulling pulling it back, and just completely ripped, you know, just destroyed my C joint. I had to have a labral reconstruction done. Like,
Yeah.
and so I mean, these shoulder injuries are a huge issue, and then, you know, another part that plays into it is just living life with a disability as well, right? I mean, for a lot of us, I mean, you guys see me here with my leg on, but I mean, at home, I'm either hopping or using forearm crutches.
Yeah.
The guys in wheelchairs, I mean, your shoulders are your mode of transportation, and again, not designed to be, you know, taking the brunt of the force to be moving around. And so if you're using your arms to wheel a wheelchair the entire day, like you're putting an immense amount of wear and tear through your shoulders, and then you're putting sledge hockey on top of it.
Yeah,
which
and you're getting hit.
And you're getting hit, which just turns it into a, you know, a really, you know, bad situation.
Well, you're really putting yourself on the line, because you're right, like that's your shoulders, your upper body, that's your mode of transportation for a lot of ways, and it's a brutal sport for your body, and you do it, and
Fun as hell
yeah, this sounds like such a glowing reference.
I wouldn't tell you. It's something that honestly I recommend anybody, you know, if you have the opportunity to try it, because I haven't met a person that I've had out for a demo or anything like that. And I mean, the very cool thing about sledge hockey is, you know, up until the national level, anybody can play.
Right.
Able-bodied, disabled, and it makes for a very cool dynamic, because you have, you know, we've got, through our hockey program, lots of kids and things like that come through, and you know, it's, these parents have never had an option to get out and get in a sled and, you know, essentially go for a skate with their kid, right?
Yeah.
Or having brothers and sisters or friends or whatever it is come out and do it. And I mean, it's just an absolute, you know, it's an absolute blast. It's such a fun sport.
nice. Yeah, it looks incredibly fun. So you've been coming to Proactive for a while, and you've worked alongside Dr. Greg Uchas here, and you know, what has it been like working along him, tackling these, you know, unique injuries? Because from our side of things, you know, we always talk about how your body is a mirror image of each other, and it's designed that way because compensating can lead to breakdown, and so there's a lot that goes into making sure you're a finely tuned machine when you are compensating. So
well, and that's, you know, from the high performance standpoint, you know, Greg got, you know, an extra few years out of me for sure. You know, and it was something that I didn't put a lot of thought into, honestly, at the beginning of the career, and it was something that I, you know, thanks to Greg, I was, you know, in Proactive Health, I was able to really start focusing on that, on the preventative side of things. And I mean, like we just touched on, having these over dominant body parts and not being symmetrical and things like that. Really, you know, when I was able to start correcting all of those things and bringing things back to that neutral standpoint, it made you know, I had a huge boost in quality in not just my everyday life, but also my sport life. And I mean, for anybody that's been here, you guys see the number of athletes that have come through and you know, see you guys here. It's obviously a very important piece to that high performance side of sport, and making sure that you're keeping your body in proper shape, right? And not letting it get into a deficit and then trying to fight back and bring it back to that neutral. You know, it's keeping it at that neutral, so you're not having those points where you're letting it go so far that you're now even more susceptible to injury.
Yeah.
Because you've let something slide to an extent that all of a sudden, okay, well, now I've made myself more prone for a shoulder injury or a knee injury or a hip injury or whatever that injury might be. So it's, I mean, you guys here have just been absolutely phenomenal from that standpoint.
we appreciate that. I mean, Greg particularly, but
Yeah, I'm sure he really appreciates it.
oh yeah.
But I mean, the other side of that, you know, coin is also, you know, I can speak to that from a disability side as well, right? And I mean, it's, for me, coming from, you know, having that disability, obviously I end up with a more severe version of being asymmetrical or compensating with one side of my body more. But I mean, it's, as I'm sure you guys can speak volumes to, it's, everybody does it in some way, shape, or form, right? And
Totally.
and when you end up in a situation like mine where I'm more on that extreme end, just my day-to-day life, I need to keep my body at that neutral, right? And yeah, it's not the, necessarily the crazy stuff that Greg would be doing if I'm, playing sledge hockey, and he's really got to get things back into position and get things back, like I said, to that neutral. But for anybody to try and keep their body where it's supposed to be, because I mean, again, if you end up going down that same rabbit hole, right? The longer you leave it,
Right.
it's going to come back and bite you in the ass, and then it's not going to be an easy return.
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be an elongated return, and
You got
it's gonna
farther to
be-
go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be more frustrating for you because you're opposed to keeping your body in check. You're now having to bring it back from a severe deficit and move it forward. And I mean, that's something that since I retired from sledge hockey has sort of been our predominant thing that we work on.
Right.
It's trying to keep my posture and my hips and my leg and stuff, because it does take a tremendous amount of abuse, and try and keep that on a very neutral plane. Because I mean, before I started seeing you guys here, I mean, I basically go and go and go, and then all of a sudden, like I would just have my back would completely go out,
Yeah.
and then I couldn't walk or do anything.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And
right.
for somebody with one leg not being able to move or bend or turn my trunk,
Yeah.
becomes extremely difficult to just have a day-to-day life with, right?
Totally.
And since I've been dealing here, I haven't had any of those issues, and if something does start even having a minor twinge somewhere, it's you address it, you deal with it, and you're going to be better off, in the long run.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that, and that's an important message we kind of try to convey is, pain is a powerful motivator and a powerful message, but if we can instill a little more body awareness into people, and to really kind of not just coming in when they're at their absolute lowest and they have no choice, but to kind of stay on top of their body and catch things early, you're just going to live a better life, because if you're able to be active, your mental health comes into play, your
Absolutely.
social life comes into play. As you know, activity is like the fountain of life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that, the other thing that I learned was, I mean, it's not, you can't look at it as a hindrance either, right? You have to look at it as, because I in the end, you're still going to be spending the same amount of time getting treatment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you're coming in once a week or
Yes.
once every couple weeks
100%.
and keeping yourself to a neutral, or you're letting your body go to absolute crap, and then you're having to come in 10 times in the
all
course of
over
a
again.
month
Yeah.
just to get yourself back to
Yes.
A, right? Like, if you're maintaining your body in that right sense, the amount of time that's going to be put into it is going to be the same, and you're going to be able to continue to do what you want to do and keep not just your physical but your mental health at a proper level, because you're not going to be laid up in bed with a heat pad on your back because you can't move anymore.
Yeah.
And
Right.
dealing with now a 2 or 3 week process of getting better, but feeling like crap mentally because you can't do anything anymore. So
Yeah.
it's
Totally.
it's one of those things that I've learned equals out, right? I've been on both sides of that again, letting my body go to that point and then completely sinking it and spending, like I said, you kind of have to, you're in 2-3 times a week to try and get yourself
Yeah.
built back up,
Yeah.
Right.
or doing it properly and just having a general maintenance, right?
Yeah.
And keeping your body going. You don't have that downtime.
Yeah. And just even having an expert or a reference point that can kind of guide you through that process, because as we know, the number one reason that people stop physical activity and then kind of fall down this rabbit hole of sedentary lifestyle leading to all kinds of problems is they get injured once and then they throw in the towel and go, I can't do anything, my knee's bum, or whatever it may be. And it's so easy to kind of reduce it to that, like, well, I had this one injury and my physical activity is something for my glory days, right? But it's a very powerful message coming from you, saying, you know, this is what we teach. Like, deal with your injuries and enjoy life, be active, and get the most out of it.
Oh, 100%, right? It's not just like applicable to high performance sport, right? It's something that's applicable to absolutely everybody, because like you discussed, I mean, not everybody's perfectly asymmetrical, and you know, you're not out there. If that was the case, I don't think you guys would be in
No, yeah,
we would, right?
We would.
There's obviously this is something that, I mean, just as human beings, we're always doing things that are causing, you know, just offsets in our body and things like that. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's something that everybody needs to be very conscious of, because, yeah, I mean, the last thing I'm sure everyone would say, the last thing anyone wants to be is injured.
Yeah.
Right? It's just, I mean, it does, unfortunately, now people have injuries and they throw in the towel. It's like, well, now I can't do this or can't do that, and I mean, a lot of times that happens, and they, you know, they either don't go get treatment, or they don't, you know, follow through on treatment, or finish it up, and there's just, it's like you said, it's a bad rabbit hole to jump down.
Yeah, and you know what? It is work. It is prioritizing that part of your life. It may be, you know, changing the way you work at a desk, or incorporating, you know, rehabilitation into your life, or getting the right treatment. But what's the alternative? You know, the alternative is you let your body fall apart, and that's just not a good life, right?
Well, and I think a lot of people look at it from a standpoint of a hindrance.
Yes,
Right,
100%.
and people look at it and go, oh crap, you know, now I gotta take this hour out of my day to go and, you know, go get treatment, where, you know, it's the negative is the last thing it should be, right? I mean, it should be, oh, good, I'm going to get, you know, hey, great, I'm going to get treatment today, that means I'm gonna be able to go out and play hockey tonight, or I'm gonna be able to go play soccer with my kids, or I'm gonna be able to maintain, opposed to looking at it in a negative light. Like, it's again having that right mentality around things. And I mean, if you can look at it like that and go, oh, hey, if I'm gonna spend an hour every week or 2 weeks or whatever's required, and that's gonna allow me to coach my son's little league team,
Done. Yeah.
boom, right? It's all of a sudden you have an incredible motivator for something like that.
And that's so key, is finding like the underlying motivation, because it's one thing, like, yes, everyone wants to get out of pain, like everyone wants to feel better, everyone wants to be healthier, but like that actually isn't enough of a motivator a lot of times. Like, it's really, whenever we have patients that are really acute, they come in because they can't do something specifically. They can't play baseball with their kid, or they can't go golfing, or whatever it is. That's when it becomes important enough to them. And so part of it is just illustrating, like, yeah, do you want to have healthy joints when you get older? Like, do you want to be able to play with your grandchildren? Like, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's making that, you got to turn that situation into a positive, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, I think our society has come to a point where we have a tendency to look at negativity more quickly than we have, you know, turn a positive spin on things.
Right.
And when you're able to do that, I mean, the whole landscape of your life changes, right?
Yeah.
It's something that, because again, I mean, now you're not just dealing with physical health, you're dealing with mental health, right? And if all of a sudden you're not able to play catch with your kids, right, it's obviously going to impact your mental health, it's going to impact their mental health and their physical health, because now that they're not getting out and being active, right? And sure, I mean, kids are going to be active enough, probably regardless,
Just
right?
being kids,
Just being kids, but, you know, getting out and doing that is something that, I mean, you're still promoting something for them, right? And you're also promoting something for you as far as physical and mental health that way.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And looking at it as a long term, because I think the focus for people is always pain. Like, can I live with this pain? You know, it might go away on its own.
Is it that bad?
It's just about the pain, where it's like, you know, fixing your body up is a lot more than just getting out of pain, right? Like, you could be setting yourself up for, you know, a much longer and more enjoyable life. And yeah, that goes so much beyond pain. And when we treat people, you know, we're looking beyond pain too, because we want this piece of machinery to be running perfectly. And sometimes, you know, achieving proper joint motion or the proper tension of tissue and all that stuff, it's just more important than trying to chase pain, because the pain and the subjective feelings, that all follows, right? That all follows once you get your body running as it should be.
Oh, 100%. No, I agree 100% on that.
Yeah. and you made a very good point that like everybody's asymmetrical. You know, we people, you'd be amazed how asymmetrical people are, and you have no idea, right? And some people have no idea that their left foot's half an inch or an inch longer than their right foot. You know.
Oh, it's, yeah, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of that in everybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something that, you know, we're not perfect genetic, you know, human beings where everything just, you know, from head to toe, you're dialed right in.
No.
I mean, and you're gonna have, over time, I mean, even just, I mean, everybody has a dominant side. Everybody
Yeah.
has a stronger side,
Yeah.
right? And which, of course, is now gonna create some sort of offset, right? You know, nobody out there is gonna be able to go out there and, you know, leg press or whatever, you know, measurement you want to use be exactly the same across the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which, I mean, would be ideal, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, pretty much an impossibility to have that happen, right? And,
Yeah.
and so, like I said, maintaining and being on top of things, make sure that you're never gonna go down that hole where you're just gonna be dealing with injury after injury, or, you know, trying to build back after suffering something that's, you know, is gonna put you down for, you know, 2-3 weeks or whatever the time frame might be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to switch gears a little here and kind of jump to something more serious. I wanted to get your reaction to the Humboldt Broncos tragedy and event, and I know that you reached out to one of the players, Ryan Straczynski. I don't know if I got that right.
Yep.
So I just wanted to kind of get your take on that and how you were able to foster a relationship there.
You know, having played junior hockey and, you know, just that, my hockey career, obviously spent, as most people have, a lot of time on a bus. And obviously when that accident occurred, it hit home with everybody, and you saw that happen, because it wasn't just, you know, it was an international incident. It transcended sport. Like, it just, the amount of people that it touched was absolutely insane. And for me, it really hit home. And when I found out about Ryan and about some of the other guys that had the more significant injuries, I guess, that were going to have those life-altering injuries, it was something that over the course of the years, especially when I started getting back into sport, it became a passion of mine, was going out and speaking to people and letting them know that, you know, a significant injury doesn't need to limit you in something anymore, right? You don't need to have the route that I went, where, you know, you might end up with some yahoo that comes and talks to you in the hospital and tells you the best thing you're ever going to be able to do is bowl, right? And so I was fortunate enough, I've been able to reach out, and I've been able to help a lot of athletes over the years. And so when that incident occurred, it just seemed sort of like a no-brainer. We had a lot of parallels between our stories, both having hockey careers and playing at a junior level in Canada. You know, and aspirations obviously to have, you know, a professional career. So with all the parallels and everything that happened, I was very fortunate, and I was able to get in touch with Ryan's parents, who in turn, once he got transferred out to Foothills, I got to go meet him, and things just really sort of clicked. And I've been fortunate enough to help out with a few of the other ones. I met up with Jacob Wasserman and Grayson Cameron, and, you know, been able to help them out in a much smaller facet. I mean, Grayson was, you know, was back playing stand-up hockey, and Jacob was somebody that just didn't want anything to do with hockey anymore after the accident, which is completely understandable. But, you know, having that proximity to Ryan here, and his goal of essentially trying to live his best life possible, you know, whether it was going to be competing at a high performance level, or whether it's going to be passing his knowledge on through coaching, or whatever the case may be. You know, we hit it off, and we've set a goal for the 2026 Paralympics. And you know, I mean, the kid is absolutely, I can't say enough good things about him. His just integrity and character are something that are so far beyond his years. You don't see kids of that age have you know, an injury of that magnitude happen and be able to turn around and do what he's done. You know, he's really just, I mean, he's become, you know, an incredibly inspiring individual, and he
Yeah.
presents himself extremely well. And I mean, you know, we've been very fortunate. You know, I've coached our provincial team here with another gentleman by the name of Stevie Arsenault, who played on the national team for a lot of years. And you know, I mean, without any of my bias, you know, after basically a year and a half of sledge hockey, we've got, you know, Ryan cracked our provincial roster already, which is an unbelievable feat. You know, just for reference, we are the 4-time reigning national champions. So I mean, we have the best sledge hockey, you know, provincial program in Canada, and you know, Ryan's pushed himself hard enough and put in the time and effort that he was able to crack that team with the injury that he has, which is, you know, there's not a lot of guys with that, you know, that T1 sort of, I think it's T1, T2 injury playing sledge hockey.
Yeah, no kidding, eh?
It's you know, it's just a phenomenal thing.
Wow. Yeah, that is inspiring. That's crazy. It's almost like I can really see that it like fuels you to almost push that, help promote that legacy of, you know, mental and physical resilience, and just being able to, you know, push past. And it's great to see it in an even younger generation. Unfortunate story, but always an inspiring, you know, outcome.
No, and I think it's something that it's unfortunately, you know, there's a lot of crappy things that happen with, especially, you know, our younger generation. And if you're a congenital disability or you have a disability, you know, acquire one at an early age, you know, a lot of the times you just don't get that exposure. And you know, whether it's parental, whatever the case is, right? And being able to offer programs that get these kids out and getting to compete and getting to have, you know, goals set and having that teamwork aspect put into their life. It's you just get to watch these kids grow at an insane rate.
Yeah.
And when you can start instituting that in some of these kids' lives, you know that, I mean, they're going to be carrying that forward into adulthood, and you know, hopefully passing that on as they continue to move forward in their sporting careers.
Right. Yeah. And you know, it sounds like from when you know, dealt with your adversity at that point, there wasn't quite so much, you know, public resources for this kind of stuff, and you've done so much to create that. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Chris Cederstrand Foundation and what that means to you?
Yeah, you know, it was something I was really fortunate. You know, I was doing some of my public speaking and things like that, and ultimately I ended up just chatting at an Oaks Minor Hockey Association just banquet or something like that they had, and it was a couple of moms off of one of the teams that was there, and you know, I told my story, and at that point I was using a very rudimentary prosthetic. I mean, the technological advances in prosthetics are just insane. And you know, I was talking about getting back into the fire industry at that point, which was something that I'm North America's first above-knee amputee firefighter. So really having to find my own path through this, and we knew at that point the path that I needed was going to be this leg that Autobach make called the PX3. And you know, ultimately they heard me talking about that and decided that, you know, we're going to get Chris's leg. And you know, I mean, it's a little black piece right here, and it's $100,000.
That's crazy.
And I really, I mean, in all honesty, at the beginning, I was just like, you know, I'd heard it before. Oh yeah, we're gonna, you know, this.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, sure you will.
Know, $100,000 is
Yeah.
$100,000. That's you know,
Right.
people fundraise. I mean, organizations fundraise and don't make that, you know, receive that in donations. And and this group of ladies just absolutely knocked it out of the park. And within 4 months, they had fundraised the $100,000 for my leg, and
It's insane.
you know, so I was fortunate enough to move forward from there and be able to pursue a lot of the things that in my life that I've been able to accomplish, and ultimately with the Cederstrand Foundation, you know, it was that giving back piece. I was, you know, I wouldn't be able to be where I am today, even just here talking with you guys, I'd not had that incredible outpouring of support from so many people. And I know how much sport has played a role in my life in both physical and mental health. And it's something that really flies under the radar for a lot of people, is just the cost of adaptive sporting equipment. You know, you heard me talk about my leg here, this leg will do a lot of things, right? I can, I was able to become a firefighter with it again. I was able to do a lot of things, but even with this leg, it's not like I can go out and go for a jog, right? I mean, it's just not, it would be extremely, extremely hard on my body.
Yeah.
And, it's not like most injuries or, getting your kid into a different sport. I mean, I had my injury, and opposed to going out and buying, say, a new set of running shoes to run again, well, I got to buy running shoes, and then I had to buy a $10,000 knee.
Yeah.
Right. And, then I had to skate. I wanted to skate again. Well, same thing. Needed new skates, need another $10,000 leg. Wanted to snowboard, and that's across the board. It's not buying, you want our kid to play basketball. Okay. Well, here's your basketball, and you got a court there. We spent our $60 and off you go. And to get a kid into wheelchair basketball, you are $5,000 on a proper wheelchair, right? And so it becomes extremely limiting, from a financial standpoint. You just can't go out there and be able to afford to do all these sports, and in a lot of cases, you just don't get to do anything, because who can afford, with a lot of the athletes and things like that I've dealt with, I mean, they're living off of AISH. They're,
they have disabilities.
They have
as well.
disabilities. They're living almost paycheck to paycheck, and they're not able to do that. And so the premise behind the Cederstrand Foundation is, ultimately giving back and being able to help people acquire, sporting equipment so that they can, go out and get that portion of their life back.
Yeah, and it's really baffling and tragic that a lot of times it comes down to finances, and it's insane that how costly it can be. But I know that I'm super interested and excited to see where the future of prosthetics lies, and what kind of technology they can come up with, and hopefully making that financially viable for people.
I honestly hope that as well, but honestly the trend is not, the trend is not pointing in that direction. The insane thing with all of these prosthetics are, I mean, outside of me, how many above knee amputees do you know? Like,
The only one.
I'm the only one, right? So there is so much R&D and everything that has to go into these products, even though they're saying, the product might only, material cost, say, might be $1,000. They still need to recoup the years and years and years of R&D that are going into this. And when you're only, talking about a very, very small, and I mean, I'm talking amputees in general, like whether it's arms, whether it's below knee, above knee, whatever it is, that population size is so small, they obviously need to be able to recoup that cost, and I don't see how that's going to change, unfortunately. It's something that, unless, and I mean, never say never. I mean, they're talking about regrowing limbs, they're talking about insane things now. But yeah, from that standpoint, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to really make things financially viable. And I mean, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, even insurance companies don't cover these types of things, right? Like, they don't look at, they all look at it as a cost benefit ratio, right? Well, if we buy him $100,000 leg, is he gonna work enough to pay that off over the course of that time period, right? Because the unfortunate side of things, like with my leg, after 5 years, it basically becomes a paperweight.
Really?
It's got a 5-year warranty on it, and basically every year you have to send it back in for a maintenance. And I mean, you get the bill sent back with it, but obviously it's covered. And I mean, I don't think I've had a year where it's been under like 13, 14 grand. So
It's nuts.
It's just crazy from that standpoint, right? So it just, I don't think we'll unfortunately see a point where that happens, and I would absolutely be thrilled if if we ever got to that point, because I mean, I've dealt with it firsthand, and I've seen so many people deal with it firsthand. I mean, it is generally the limiting factor in people being able to get back and be physically active again.
Yeah, it's such an unfortunate dilemma, and it sucks for that to be one of those bottleneck limiting factors. I get it from the standpoint of these companies. They want to further their research and their technology, and they need funding, and they're advanced pieces of equipment for sure. But I don't know. Would love to see the day. I know you do too, and hopefully that'll happen in our lifetime.
Oh, I hope so as well.
Well, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It's been it's just great chatting with you, catching up.
No, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute blast.
Awesome. And thanks to all our listeners. Hope you enjoyed it. And, we appreciate every listen we get. So thanks and take care.